One of the most common questions I get is where do I begin with comics? With the endless amount of series and years of continuity, it can be challenging finding a starting point. But that's why I started this series, where I go through this week's new books, picking out notable new series, ongoing series starting new arcs, and trades and graphic novels coming out this week. Then I finish things up with my starting point of the week, the starting point I am most excited about coming out this week. And this is one packed week, probably the most packed week I have done thus far. A lot of big new series coming out, the start of multiple new eras, so let's get into it by starting with the notable new series coming out this week. This week begins and ends with DC's All-In Special #1, and this is set to do two major things. One, kind of be the coda of the current Absolute Power event, which is also ending this week, as well as a preview of the new Absolute Universe that's going to be going on. So if you're interested in DC Comics for the next few months, or even longer, you're going to want to pick up this special because this is going to be the literal starting point for this major initiative that's going forward. This specific issue is going to be drawn by Daniel Sampier and Wesley Craig, two artists I really adore, but two artists that have very different styles. So I think that's going to tell you the tone of these two different universes, the main DC universe versus this Absolute universe. And I know there's a lot of controversy regarding this Absolute idea, a lot of naysayers out there, but I'll be honest, I'm excited for it. It does seem like a lot of bold ideas behind it. I like the creative teams. Kelly Thompson on Wonder Woman, Scott Snyder on Batman doesn't seem like the biggest stretch in the world, but Nick Dragotta drawing Batman, who I'm a huge fan of because of East of West. I don't know. I know it looks different and people have mocked the design. It looks like Fat Batman. I don't know what you want to say, or Batman Who Lifts has been kind of the moniker. And maybe it will work. And I didn't think much of the new Ultimate Universe for Marvel when it was coming out. I thought it seemed a little bit, too passe. But right now it's putting out some of the best books Marvel has. So I think that is trying to make me reevaluate ideas like that and say, hey, maybe it can work. Maybe this is what comics need right now. Just try some of these ideas, take these characters that have been around forever and just go a little bit different direction for them. And it's not like this hasn't happened before. We have Earth One and all these other type of ideas that try to modernize New 52. I don't think this is that. I think this is something very different because we're going to have both the regular universe and Absolute Universe, and we'll see how it goes. But ultimately, if you're a DC fan, if you're a person that is thinking about getting back into DC Comics, you're going to want to read this because it's going to give you the literal starting point, kind of where DC Comics are going for the next, seems like at least the next half year, if not longer. So if you don't have the information that is here, it might seem weird. My only concern is that this ends up feeling more like a preview rather than an actual comic itself, that it just feels like, okay, this is what to expect down the line. I hope that's not the case, especially with the artists that are here. Give them a real story to sink into. And if you're, a little bit hesitant about this initiative, try this. And if you end up liking it, maybe that can turn your frown upside down, as they say. So a lot of question marks so far, and hopefully this answers a few of them. And speaking of starting new eras, we have Star Wars: The Battle of Jakku, Insurgency Rising #1. And what this is doing is starting a new era of Star Wars comics. Previously, everything was taking place between the movies of Empire and Return of the Jedi. And I lost interest, to be honest with you, with that, because I feel like when you're trying to tell so many stories within a very confined time, you don't have a lot of options. Honestly, it's quite impressive how long they were able to keep it going, considering you have to tell these stories that are compelling, but at the same time don't majorly change anything. I think it's even harder than doing a prequel because you're even more limited. And I do feel like eventually it was kind of felt, and that's why I stepped away. But now we don't have that. Well, we kind of do, but the time frame is a lot larger as this is taking place between Jedi and Force Awakens. And that's an era I'm actually really interested in because I've not read much about it. I would call myself a moderate Star Wars fan. I've watched the movies, of course. I've watched the shows. I read a couple books here and there. But this time frame is, I feel like, one we don't get a lot of. Of course, we have The Mandalorian and a few others. There's just a lot of questions here, and I don't think they'll be as confined. So that has me excited to see, what can they do? What questions can they answer regarding how did we get from where we were at the end of Return of the Jedi and to the beginning of Force Awakens? So that has me excited. That is going to bring me back, at least for this special, to see if this shift of focus can breathe new life into the Star Wars comics, because it is desperately needed. Also, if Marvel will put some of their better artists on the Star Wars books, because often the artists are fine. They're maybe mediocre at best, but maybe knowing that this might bring a lot of new people to Star Wars comics that fell off, or people that are just interested, like I am, regarding, what exactly happened during this time frame. They'll put better artists, because looking at the previews of this special, they look better than the majority of Star Wars comics I was reading before I ended. So there's a little bit of a bright spot. So I know Star Wars is never fun to talk about, to be honest, because people just lose their minds no matter what you say. But I try to lean to hoping for the best, and if we get it, being excited for it. And if we don't get it, the good thing about comics is that there are plenty of other comics out there. So why waste your time on something you're not enjoying? I'm hoping I can get back to enjoying Star Wars comics once again. All right, well, we're going to head back to DC for DC Horror Presents Creature Commandos #1. And it's officially October. Crazy how time flies. So we are officially in spooky season. So that means we're probably going to get a lot of horror books. We've gotten some already. And this is DC starting their run right away. Although Creature Commandos, it's horror adjacent. It's an action book with horror characters in it. I have not read a huge amount of Creature Commando, so I'm kind of going into this blind. I do know they have the animated movie coming soon. I'm guessing this is a big reason this comic is out, although timing seems a bit off. Maybe we'll be getting more. I'm not sure. But if you're interested in that movie, because it's supposed to be starting this new era of DC Comics moving forward, this may be a good #1 special to jump into, kind of get an idea who these characters are. It does look like, based upon the preview art of this, as well as some of the preview art of the movie, they're sticking very similar to characters. A lot of the same characters appear to be in both. So again, I'm going into this blind. I don't know much about them, but that's also why I'm excited about it, because it gives me the opportunity to learn more about them. Maybe it'll get me more excited for that animated movie going forward. And again, I do love myself horror, especially this time of year. So if you want horror, but maybe you don't want horror that's scary, this should be a good option this week. Okay, we're going to head over to Boom Studios for the Creeping Below #1. And the first thing that intrigues me with this comic is the creative team. This is written by Brian Azzarello, who, of course, is probably best known for his work on 100 Bullets, and the artist is Vanessa Del Rey. I first encountered her work with the crime series Hit, became an instant fan, but I do think her style best fits with horror, as seen in series like The Empty Man, which may be her strongest work to date. With this comic, it does seem like it's a combination of both genres set within a revenge tale. It's about a woman who's a big fan of heavy metal and goes to a concert of one of her favorite bands thinking it's going to be a good time. It's a nice local band, but things go awry. They actually go horrible as she is assaulted. But after that, she ends up going on a vengeance tour. But there's a bit of an additional piece to this, as there are some supernatural elements, as she may be empowered by Norse gods. And there, of course, is a lot of Norse connection with a lot of heavy metal bands, so that makes a lot of sense. They describe this as Swamp Thing by way of The Crow, which certainly intrigues me. And I think when you look at the creative team here, I can get why they would get behind a story like this. They are both good at meshing these genres, as Brian Azzarello has done a lot of crime stories that have a hint of horror. And as I mentioned with Vanessa Del Rey, she's lived in both worlds. So I do think this has a really solid recipe of being a really good series, which Boom has put out a lot of great original new series this year, and hoping this gets added to that pile. Now for something completely different, we're going to Dynamite Comics for Barbarella #1. I try to be honest here when it comes to books I don't know much about, or subjects or titles or properties, and Barbarella is on that list. I think I have seen the opening of one movie when it was on the Sci-Fi Channel years ago, and that's about it. That's where my knowledge ends. But I do know there are a lot of Barbarella fans out there for sure. This is not the first Barbarella comic by any means. The creative team here, again, I'm not super familiar with. We have Blake Northcutt and Anna Mazzava. And again, don't know much about them. And this is coming from Dynamite Comics as well, who I think are kind of hit and miss when it comes to properties like this. Sometimes it does feel like they're just cashing in on a name. They love their variant covers even more than Marvel and DC, but they have also put out some good licensed books as well. Space Ghost right now, for example, I've really enjoyed. So if you are a Barbarella fan, just know it's coming out this week, and maybe you'll end up getting what you want from this property. If you're going to ask me, out of all the new comics coming out this week, which one do I have the most faith in? Which one am I the most excited about? Which one do I think will be the best of the bunch? It's actually Skin Police #1. Why is that in a week with so many big releases, with so many new comics with some really big names? Well, it's because of the writer Jordan Thomas, who I think is one of the most exciting writers in comics right now, who's doing things unlike anyone else. He's writing one of my favorite crime series right now in comics, Mugshots. Also love past work like The Man from Maybe, and nothing he does is ever like what he did before. He loves to do a lot of strange and interesting ideas. And this is similar. This takes place in the future where fertility levels around the globe have plummeted. So in order to try to have children, the rich are using the black market to replicate their own DNA with horrific results, leading to people being born that are killers. And now a team is formed to try to stop those individuals by the UN. I get a sense that this is going to be one of those books that likes to push boundaries, that isn't afraid to get weird and wacky and all different types of tones for sure. The art looks solid as well. I don't know the artist that well, but one thing Jordan Thomas has done is partnered with good artists that fit the tone of the story, like Shaky Kane, as well as the artist on Mugshots right now. So he may not be a name that is popular as Jeff Johns, who we'll get to in a moment, or Scott Snyder, but maybe one day he will get there. Plus, I do think it's just exciting seeing someone trying to make a name for themselves, doing things that is kind of off the wall compared to everything else on the shelves right now. So if you want to read something that maybe is more self-contained, that is different, that is trying new things, I think your best option this week would be Skin Police #1. And speaking of Jeff Johns from Image Comics, this week we have Hyde Street #1. And this is another major release because this is also bringing together Jeff Johns and Ivan Reis, who of course are known for some phenomenal books they did with DC, like Blackest Night, as well as Aquaman, which might be the favorite thing that they did that I have enjoyed. Now, I mentioned with Skin Street how different that is as a book. Hyde Street, to be fair, does seem very different than the other Ghost Machine books. Not just kind of a straightforward Superman or science fiction story. It's about a street where a lot of strange and interesting people live, including Mr. X-Ray, Pranky, the world's most dangerous Boy Scout, Miss Goodbye, and many more. So I don't really know what to expect with this. I will say the preview art, as you would expect, looks great. I don't know the last time I've seen Ivan Reis do interiors, so I do love the fact that we're getting that. And we know that they have done magic together, him and Jeff Johns, so can they repeat that? And again, this also feels like it's more of a horror story. We are in spooky season, which is probably why they waited for this to come out now compared to the other Ghost Machine books that have been out for a few months now. So I have enjoyed the vast majority of the Ghost Machine books. Geiger is probably still my favorite, but I do think this has potential of even surpassing that if Jeff Johns and Ivan Reis can repeat what they did previously. The last new series we're going to talk about is Ghost Rider Robbie Reyes Special #1. I mentioned last time I did this that I feel like every week we get a new Ghost Rider #1, and I guess I'm being proven right as a new week, a new Ghost Rider. Although, to be fair, this is not the start of a new ongoing series or new miniseries. This is simply a special done to honor Latino American Heritage Month. So again, no complaints here. I actually do really like Robbie Reyes as a character, and I do wish they ended up using him more. I liked his use in Jason Aaron's Avengers run, even though I didn't love that run. It was nice seeing him a part of the Avengers. And I like Johnny Blaze and Danny Ketch, but they're two characters that are very similar. It's hard to tell them apart sometimes. Robbie Reyes is very much his own character, and not just because he drives a car instead of riding a motorcycle. So I'm happy he's at least getting a special. It's been a while since we've had a Robbie Reyes solo book. So hopefully this does well enough, and maybe it can lead to another miniseries, another ongoing, because I do know there are a lot of Robbie Reyes fans out there that have been vocal about his lack of usage as of late. And this might be just them throwing a bone, but Maybe it could lead to something greater, especially if this ends up being a really good issue. All right, we looked at the notable new series coming out this week. Now we're going to look at some ongoing starting new arcs. The first new ongoing series starting a new arc is Batman with issue number 153. One big thing about DC is not only with the All-In Special is it launching this new initiative, but part of it too was their major books were also all starting some new arcs, trying to making it the perfect time to jump into DC Comics, hence the All-In. So obviously makes a video like this great because I have so many books to talk about. And as someone who dropped off of Batman a while ago, when Zdarsky's run started, I was enjoying it. I just didn't click with it, so I eventually let it go. I didn't read any of the tie-ins to Absolute Power, so I'm going to try it again, and hopefully it's working. This time, the story is centering on Bruce Wayne, where he has a new public initiative to try to fix Gotham and make it a great city. And it does make me think of all those online arguments about how Bruce Wayne would do so much more good for Gotham as a public servant rather than Batman. So I guess they're trying to take that idea and put it inside the comic. We'll see how it works. I mean, the artist here is Jorge Jimenez, who is phenomenal. His work on Batman has been so good, and he's been working with multiple writers. So even when I have not loved the Batman comics, they have always looked quite good as well. So I'm going to try it again. Hopefully I end up liking it this time. If you're like myself and maybe dropped off of Batman looking for a good starting point, this week is your opportunity. Staying with DC, we're going to Birds of Prey number 14. Again, another series with the All-In Initiative, starting a new arc. And I really enjoyed this series until the last arc. It wasn't bad. It just felt a little stuck in the mud. It felt like an arc that didn't give these characters the opportunity to kind of connect and have fun like the first arc did. Also was missing Leonardo Romero. Sadly, he's still not back. But what I'm really hurt by, what I'm a little worried by, is the fact that Jordi Belair is not on colors because she was doing such amazing work with this series. Her colors, I think, gave this book a lot of its personality. Will that continue here? I'm not sure. The storyline here has the Birds of Prey going undercover to infiltrate the Ninth Day, which is a mysterious corporation they believe are kidnapping people, including Amazons. And I love myself a good undercover story. The Birds of Prey going undercover, that could be really fun, especially like a character like Big Barda, her trying to play someone else or be like a normal person in a business setting. I don't know, that team seems to just write itself. So that does have me excited. I know the Kelly Thompson's books, I really enjoyed her Captain Marvel run, for example, but not every arc worked. Sometimes just one didn't click and then she was able to recover. Again, I don't think the last arc was bad. It just wasn't as strong as when the book began, but maybe it can recapture that. This arc doesn't have the artists I was hoping for, but these artists can be good as well. The preview pages look solid, so hoping this gets back on track this week. And yes, there are other comics besides DC this week as we head over to Image for I Hate Fairyland number 16. I was the biggest fan of this initial run. I read every issue. I actually did a lot of podcasts on it for Geekcast Radio, where we pretty much talked about every volume. When it came back, I enjoyed it. I think I stopped around issue 8 or so because eventually it just felt like, okay, this story has gone as much as I want to go with it. Is there anything new to say? And with this final arc, it seems like this might be the end. It's called Happy Endgame. Maybe this is Scotty Young finally bringing it to an end. Appears that maybe there's a little bit of a Watchmen parody happening, just looking at the cover with kind of his take on that famous button. So that's bringing me back. Scotty Young is not doing the art, but I do think the art looks very akin to what you would expect. I do think it still looks very similar, throughout this entire run, no matter who was doing the art duty. So kudos to Young for finding artists who can kind of recapture that magic. It's also the perfect counterbalance with a week with so many big and serious books, something like this that's silly and fun. Now, if you've never read it before, jumping in now might be a bit weird, but the good thing is you can go back to the original volumes, and it's a read that's really fun and breezy and shouldn't take you too long to get caught up. We looked at the notable new series, some ongoing starting new arcs. Now we're going to look at the trades and graphic novels coming out this week. The first trade paperback we're going to talk about is Ultimate Black Panther Volume 1. I mentioned how I thought Marvel's Ultimate line right now is putting out some of their best books. I will say, at first, Ultimate Black Panther was a little bit of a disappointment. I'm a huge fan of Brian Hill. I love a lot of his work. And I had high expectations for this. And the first arc, I will say, it wasn't bad. It just felt rather standard. It didn't seem like it was taking advantage of this opportunity to tell a brand new mythos for the character. Although the last few issues, that's changed. I bring that up because if you're reading this first volume and it doesn't seem like all that different than a typical Black Panther story, know that it just took more of the slow burn approach. And now I think a lot of the things it was building at the beginning are really starting to pay off. And I have much more hope for this within the last 2 issues than I did the first few. Now, I don't think the first few are bad per se. I just thought I was hoping for a little bit more. I was hoping for something a bit more drastic. And I think it was much more reserved, which I think in the long run might actually be the better choice. We shall see. But still, a strong book. If you're a Black Panther fan and not enjoying the normal continuity run, which I feel like has dropped off as well, I think this is much improved compared to that. Over at DC, we have This Is Our Land, a Blue Beetle story, and this is part of the young adult line that DC has. And personally, I love this idea. I think this is really smart for DC. YA books are the biggest market in comics right now. Yes, even more than manga. People like Dave Pilkey are selling more than most publishers. You look at the best-selling books this month or every other month, the vast majority of them are Dogman, Raina Tagmeyer, and other people. So I can see why DC is like, well, let's get in on this and do some of our own. And they've had a number of YA books. Some have been good, some have been bad, some have been in between. I think a character like Blue Beetle, this makes so much sense. He's already a teenager, so telling a story that fits into that mold should be pretty easily. And you don't have to worry about any other continuity. You don't have to worry about anything else. You can try new things. You can change the mythos. You can build upon it, which makes it an easy starting point, especially for young adult readers. If they've never read a Blue Beetle comic before or a comic before, they can pick this up and everything is there for them. And if you're an adult, don't turn your nose just because it's YA, because some of the YA books actually tell better stories than some of the adult books. So give it a shot if you're a Blue Beetle fan and you've not been happy with some of the other books or you just want more Blue Beetle in your life. Over at Distillery, we have the hardcover release for Blasphemous. And I love this idea. It makes a lot of sense. It's a perfect satire of today's world, and the social commentary is a bit obvious, but it's also quite correct. It is a world in where pop stars have ascended to divinity status, and the masses view them as basically new gods. And with these superstars, some are angels, some thrive to be demons. And with that, you have a whole new type of society being formed. I really enjoyed this series. I thought the art was rather strong. One thing I love about Distillery is the variety of titles that they have. Really nothing feels the same. Like sometimes, with Image, for example, it took them a bit to establish an identity that wasn't just the extreme. Distillery has done that quite well right out the gate. And as I mentioned previously, when it comes to their hardcover collections, they are put together quite well. They put a lot of effort in making sure that they look great, that they're well made. And I think that means a lot. I feel like you can tell they have so much faith and respect for the material that they're making. It reminds me a lot, if I mentioned it before, with what Marvel Knights did with Marvel, making sure quality was put in at the beginning with stories, as well as when it came to creating the actual comics. And Distillery has picking up on that idea and followed through with it as well. Now it's time to make things a bit more classy, because we're heading over to Drawn and Quarterly for the hardcover release of Forces of Nature. And this is the arrival of the greatest single panel cartoonist since Charles Addam. And this is a collection of cartoons from Edward Steed. And he, of course, if you look at this, they kind of look like similar cartoons that you would see in New Yorker. That's exactly what this is. A bunch of one panel comics, a collection put together. And the thing I love about comics is how diverse it is as a storytelling device. You can have 9-panel grids that tell this in-depth story, or you can have this type of comic that is just one panel. And telling a story like this, telling a joke using only one image, is a special skill. It may seem easy, but when you see people try to do it that don't have that skill, you can tell right away. So I do think, this is one of those books that's not going to appeal to everyone. I don't know the amount of people out there that are dying for this collection, but there are some people who enjoy this. I could see myself, I would definitely pick this up from the library just to flip through it. And it's one of those things that you can kind of turn to any page. It's kind of a nice, coffee table book, as they say. And again, one thing I love about comics, as I mentioned, is that there are different spices for everyone. So this book, Forces of Nature, probably not going to appeal to maybe the most average superhero fan. But for those that maybe don't love superhero comics, love things that are a bit different, you have stuff like this to enjoy. And the last graphic novel we're going to talk about is Blacking Out. This comes from Dark Horse Comics. It is written by Chip Mosher with art by Peter Krause. And no, Keanu Reeves has nothing to do with it. I know that looks like him on the cover. I don't know if that's just done by mistake or it's just happenstance, but nothing to do with this, although Keanu Reeves has been involved with other comics. This is about a disgraced ex-cop, Conrad, who seeks redemption by unraveling an unsolved murder during Southern California's fire season. Conrad follows one lone clue, a discarded crucifix, to unravel the death of Karen Littleton, whose body was found amid a blaze that scorched 10,000 acres. The search leads him to clash with the victim's father and prime suspect, Robert Littleton, as well as hostile former colleagues of the local police force. All the while, Conrad combats his own consuming alcoholism and fading faculties. And this sounds right up my alley. It sounds very tropish, you know, the ex-cop trying to do good while having a lot of his own personal demons. But sometimes those tropes can lead to a really good story. It's all about execution. And, you know, with this being a self-contained story, not a lot of publishers do these anymore. I feel like Dark Horse is one of the few. Image does it here and there, but Dark Horse seems to do it the most out of all publishers, outside of things like Drawn Accordingly and Fantagraphics and those that, you know, don't really do monthly issues anymore. So I haven't seen much discussion about this, so I wanted to point it out because if you're like me, you've loved these types of stories, you're not really getting it with monthly issues, you can try this graphic novel coming out this week. It's all come down to this. Like I said, it was a big week this week, but my starting point of the week is going to be going a bit of a different direction. One that may be a little bit simpler to jump into, plus is a lot nicer on the wallet. So this has been a very heavy DC week, and that's not going to stop here because I'm picking Catwoman Trial of Catwoman, but this is a very special compact comic edition. And for those that don't know, the compact comics are these digest versions of some of DC's best stories. And the best part about them, they're only $10, which is great because you get a lot of comic with this, starting with Selina's Big Score, which was a single issue done by Darwin Cook, one of my all-time favorite comic book creators. Sad that he is no longer with us. And also, it gets into his run on Catwoman with Ed Brubaker, my all-time favorite comic book writer. So I love this run. It's one of the few comics I actually have the omnibus of because of how much I love this. But what's great about that is the omnibus is obviously very expensive. Something like this is only $10. It's not going to give you all of Ed Brubaker's run on Catwoman, but it's going to give you, honestly, the best part of it because when Darwin Cook leaves, I do feel like it's not as strong. But it is just the perfect opportunity for a starting point, you know, with all these other things coming out this week, all these big titles. Those are great and everything, but sometimes it's just good to read something that is not in the muck, that is kind of its own thing that you can read and just enjoy. You don't have to worry about everything else. And this, to me, is the standard for Catwoman comics. It is, I think, the best Catwoman comic that may have been read, at least in this century. And I'm not even a huge Catwoman fan, but when you have creators like this getting the opportunity to tell their story, it's, you know, a no-brainer, especially the Selina Big Score, which is a single issue that you can read at any time. It's worth it just for that. Honestly, I'd pay $10 just for that single issue. And then you get, you know, many more comics after that, including Catwoman 1 to 9 and a few issues of Detective Comics. So there's a lot here for $10. And I got to give kudos to DC. I think they've been doing a lot to try to really make their comics feel fresh, and then also giving people an opportunity to get into comics really easily. And that's exactly what the compact comics have done. So if this is a run that you've never got into so if this is one of those runs that you always wanted to get into, but you never have, or maybe you have friends that you want to recommend them something or give them a gift, perfect opportunity. This is like a great stocking stuffer. I know talking about Christmas seems crazy when we're not even Halloween, or hey, maybe you can just start giving them out for Halloween. What's better than getting comics in your Halloween jug or whatever you use for candy nowadays? I don't know. I'm just rambling, but I do love this book. I think it's a great addition to anyone's collection, so check it out. All right, that's it for this week's starting points. Let me know what starting point that you're most excited about. As always, you can find all my stuff on Twitter, on social media, everywhere, including TikTok, Facebook. Also, check out my weekly article at nerdinitiative.com, where I go down my top 10 most anticipated books each week. But for now, comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one.